can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, we're gonna be talking about The Adventures of Superman, Jon Kent, #2 by Tom Taylor and Clayton Henry. This issue, there's not really a whole heap of lot of stuff to deep dive into because a lot of this issue is mostly just Jon Kent throwing hands with Ultraman. For those who are unfamiliar, Ultraman is the Earth 3 version of Superman from the Crime Syndicate universe, a very evil version of Superman. At one point in time, I would have said Ultraman was one of the more well-known versions of the quotey fingers evil Superman trope, but we'll talk about why that's the case here a little bit later. I don't want to bury the lead here, but basically what you need to know about this is that Jon Kent is the only version of Superman who can help Val-Zod and the Lois Lane of Earth 2, who was turned into a version of Red Tornado. He is the only version of Superman who can help them stop Ultraman, who as of late has been cutting a swath across the multiverse, killing every version of Kal-El in existence. And every time he does, that Earth in the multiverse crumbles, not necessarily just because Superman's not there, but because Superman is the linchpin that helps keep everything together. He's the one who helps stop all the major threats. So once there's no Superman to protect that Earth, Ultraman can just run roughshod over it. And because Ultraman does not have the same weakness to kryptonite that say other Supermen tend to have, he actually is empowered by kryptonite. A combination of this as well as a machine that he uses to disrupt their powers to weaken those other versions of Superman is how he's been able to run roughshod across the multiverse. Now, what some people are probably thinking, why does this work for Ultraman on all these other Supermen? Why would Jon Kent be the Superman who would be able to get past that? And the reasonings why, I think we kind of talked about and hinted at in the previous video I did for The Adventures of Superman, Jon Kent #1, but just to reiterate those once again real quickly, is that, well, for one, Jon Kent is gaining new powers, and by new powers I mean his Kryptonian physiology is mutating into what Clark Kent did back during the New Earth DC Comics continuity, where he turned into Superman Blue. You know, the electrical Superman that was little more than what if Superman had Black Lightning's powers. Jon Kent has been slowly metamorphosing into that version of Superman, something that Ultraman is not prepared for. The main reason why the Earth Prime Jon Kent is the only one who can actually help, you know, Lois Lane and Val-Zod of Earth 2 stop Ultraman is because Jon Kent of Earth Prime is the only other Jon Kent in the entirety of the multiverse who is a full-grown person capable of actually standing up to Ultraman, other than the Jon Kent of the deceased universe. That version of Jon Kent also aged up to a degree, but all the other Jon Kents in the multiverse are all still preteen, 12, maybe going on 13 years old by this point. They're not old enough to stand up to Ultraman and have the power necessary to take him down, hence why they chose this particular version of Jon Kent to take him on. But once again, the Superman Blue aspect of Jonathan Kent that is coming into play, this is what is ultimately going to help him defeat Ultraman. Now, we're never going to get the true full answer as to whether or not he ever actually would have defeated Ultraman with these powers because, well, for one, Jonathan Kent doesn't know how to control them. They come in spurts. These powers kind of wax and wane just in the moment, and when he does tend to call upon them and use them, it leaves him exhausted. So he doesn't actually defeat Ultraman in this issue using those capabilities. Now, another thing to take into consideration here is that this is also setting up something big for Jon Kent status quo wise, because in this, Ultraman admits Jon Kent punching him with the power of Superman Blue was the hardest he's ever been hit. So I guess what Carter said was true.
You gonna like Jon Kent whether you like it or not.
The real reason that Ultraman is sent to the gulag is not because of Jon Kent. It's actually thanks to his father, Superman, or rather, the guy who would have been his father on another Earth. You see, earlier I talked about why originally Ultraman was the most commonly referenced and well-known version of the evil Superman trope. That was up until the release of 2013's Injustice Gods Among Us video game, where we were introduced to an evil version of Superman, which I would say for many people has become the litmus test for evil Supermen whenever the topic is ever brought up. And we knew for a while that the Injustice version of Superman was going to show up and meet with Jon Kent, and this is a huge deal because this version of Superman is the one who ultimately destroys Ultraman, snapping his neck, killing him, and saving the son that he never had. Now, the reason why this is such a big deal and why this version of Superman is here, I think is pretty obvious. He probably knows about what Ultraman was doing, killing all of the other Supermen across the multiverse. And we know that by the time that Jon, Val-Zod, and Lois Lane had caught up with Ultraman on the next Earth that he jumped to, this was the point where he had jumped to what seems to be the Injustice universe. And by a point where Superman has already become the fascist version of Superman from that video game series. He's killed Ultraman because, well, for one, he probably heard Ultraman talking really spicy that he is going to make it his life's effort to come to Jon's Earth and make his version of Lois Lane suffer more than any other version of Lois Lane who he's ever encountered, which he largely says he doesn't really bother with the Lois Lanes on the other Earths that he has encountered, but this case, he is going to give Lois Lane of Earth Prime his undivided attention. This is very likely what riled up the Injustice version of Superman. But what makes this even more heartbreaking is because, for those unfamiliar with the Injustice universe, that version of Superman, he no longer has a Lois Lane because he was tricked into killing his version of Lois Lane by the Joker. In that universe, Joker used the Scarecrow's fear toxin to trick Superman into seeing Lois Lane as his greatest fear, which is Doomsday. With that said, Superman seeing Lois Lane as Doomsday, he literally beat the brakes off of her. What made this even worse was that at the time, Lois Lane was pregnant with their son, who would have been Jon Kent. And because of the fact that Lois Lane's death was set to trigger a nuclear explosion in Metropolis, this was what turned Superman into the fascist version of Superman in that video game series. He never got to meet his actual son, Jon Kent, because that child died in the womb when he unintentionally murdered Lois. How is this going to affect Jon? This is where I think things are going to get really interesting because, as we've seen, he's already dealt with Ultraman having to compartmentalize the idea of looking someone in the eyes for years as he grew up and turned into a grown man, way off in the far-flung reaches of space. He had to live with the idea of looking someone in the eyes who's a version of his dad from another Earth in the multiverse, and this person be so evil and so opposite of who his father truly is. Imagine him getting to know the Injustice version of Superman, who once again had become this wholly fascist version of the Man of Steel. I could have easily imagined Jon seeing this guy as potentially a hero until he truly learns what this version of Superman has been up to. And who knows, maybe he could make this version of Superman see the error of his ways. I could even also see this version of Superman not letting Jon Kent return back to his universe. I can see all of these things coming into play. Now, as for what's going to happen with Val-Zod and Lois Lane, aka Red Tornado of Earth 2, that's another story. They have been sent to the Phantom Zone, and the Phantom Zone projector, by all accounts, has been destroyed. So maybe Jon might be able to find a way to rebuild the Phantom Zone projector and get Val-Zod and Lois Lane back. Maybe he might be able to find resources on the Injustice Earth to try and fix it. That remains to be seen. But right now, Jon Kent is alone with another version of his father who just so happens to be an evil sumbitch. And I'm kind of here for it. I really can't wait to see how Jon is going to deal with this. But anyways, that's everything I want to talk about with the Adventures of Superman Jon Kent #2. If you enjoyed this video, do the YouTube thing, like, share, comment, subscribe, and make sure to tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that I put out. Until next time, let me know what you thought about the Adventures of Superman Jon Kent #2. Keep it plus ultra and sound off. in the comments.